Hello, my name is Chloe and welcome back to my channel. Today I thought it'd be fun to go through all of the books that I've read so far from the month of January to the month of June and rank them from worst to best. I was initially going to do a June wrap up, but I thought that this might be a little bit more fun and it means that I get to go through every book that I've read so far this year as well. Just to save time, I'll probably do like a one sentence review of each of the books, otherwise we will be here for a while because I have read 43 books in the first 6 months of this year, and for me that is like a wild number. Last year I read 54 books in total, and given that I've read 43 so far this year, I don't think it'd be out of the question for me to read like 80 this year. And I know that some people read like 100 books a year, and like that is crazy to me. That's like an insane number. For me, reading something like 80 would like blow my mind, and I'd be so proud of myself because I kind of fell away from reading during uni. So my read count was very low then, and I only really got back into reading maybe like 2 years ago. And each year I just keep reading more and more and more, and I'm not getting sick of it, which is wonderful, you know, avid readers club and all that. But yeah, 43 books to go through, so let's not waste any time here. Before I go through each of the books, I thought it'd be fun to share some stats. So as I said, I've read 43 books so far this year. Out of those 43 books, 2 of them have been 2-star, 17 have been 3-star, 17 have been 4-star, and 7 have been 5-star. I feel like I need some kind of additional breakdown there because that's like a very high number of 3 and 4 stars. Maybe I've just read some very average to good books. For me, 3 stars is like it's a good book, 4 stars is it's a great book, and 5 stars is it's a new favourite that I would recommend to people. I think I should maybe start doing half stars and things like that, but I do my reviews on Goodreads and they don't allow you to do half stars, so I just kind of rate it based off of that. But it might be good to have that additional breakdown. I might look into doing that. So onto the genre stats. No one will be surprised to hear that I read 9 fantasies, that's my favourite genre. My second favourite genre is historical fiction. I read 6 of those. I read 5 romance books, which is crazy for me because I never used to read romance at all. I'm so glad that I'm opening myself up to new genres this year. I read 4 thriller, 3 self-help, 3 literary fiction, 2 sci-fi, 2 psychological fiction, 2 epistolary, and 7 that I've put into an other category because each of those books I've only read 1 of each of the genre, so to save time I won't go through it here, but I will put the information into the description below where I'll have all my stats listed. For the number of books I've read so far this year, another goal of mine other than to read more genres is to start tackling my big TBR. I have read 20 books from my physical TBR, 18 are from the library, and 5 are from my Kindle. So I've read more books not from my physical TBR, and you know, I think that's quite telling. This is why I need to stick to my TBR and hold myself accountable. But yeah, that's my stats for the first 6 months of this year, and I'm so excited to see what the second 6 months of the year will hold in store for me. But let's go through each of the books that I've read, starting from the worst to the best. The worst book that I've read so far this year, no one will be surprised to hear, if they know me, that it is The Love Hypothesis. For me, this was very cringy, and all I've really got to say about it is the scene where she's sitting on the professor's lap during a lecture. As someone who went to uni, ew. My second 2-star book was Convenience Store Women. For me, not much really happened and I found the story quite forgettable, but I know that other people do love it. Moving on to my 3-star reads. So firstly, we've got Twisted Love. I've read that on my Kindle. For me, it was a meh romance, but it was quite easy to read. The next one was another Kindle book, and that was How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories. And for me, I think this would have actually been better if I'd read it physically instead of on the Kindle because there's lots of pictures within this book. The next one was another Kindle read, and that was War of the Worlds. For me, it was a decent story, but it was quite outdated, especially compared to other newer sci-fi books that I've read. The next one was from the library, and that was Dear Dolly. It was quite humorous at points and it was really easy to read, but it wasn't very profound or anything for me. Next, we've got another library book that was Notes on a Nervous Planet. That was an okay self-help book for me. It was quite wholesome though, and a nice easy page turner. The next one's from my physical TBR, woo! And that is The Man Who Died Twice. It was cozy mystery vibes, but I did find it quite slow and tedious throughout. Next one is, you guessed it, another library book, and that was Oh William. I found it very bingeable, and it was really easy to read, but it was kind of like dull at points for me. Next one is The Cat Who Saved Books. It's got a cute cat, it's got books in it, and it's got magic, combining so many of my favourite things, but it did fall a little bit short of the expectations that I had of it. The next one is Things We Never Got Over. For me, it was an okay romance, again a page turner, but I wasn't really vouching for the two main people to get together, which I feel like is probably the main point of a romance book. The next one is The Atlas Paradox, a moment for how pretty this is. For me, it was way too long for what happened within the book, but I did enjoy the continuation of the character development throughout. The next one is How to Kill Your Family. I found it really funny and it was a really interesting and unique story, but I didn't really enjoy the ending of it, and that's why it fell a bit short for me. Again, we've got another library book, and that is Rizzio. For me, it was a really great short story about Mary, Queen of Scots, but for short stories, I often find it very difficult to get really engaged within it, which is why it's only rated 3 stars. Next up, we've got The Silent Patient. I thought it was quite underwhelming, and that might be because it was so overhyped, but it is a very interesting concept to the story, and if you go in with lower expectations, you might come out with a higher result. Next up, we have Beautiful World, Where Are You? That is my least favourite Sally Rooney book, and I don't really remember much of what happened or the characters, which I think is quite telling. Next up, we've got another physical book. Yay, go me. It is Verity. It was a thriller, but I kind of found it funny at points, and I don't think it was trying to be. But it is a very bingeable writing style, and it kept me on my toes and interested throughout. Oh look, another physical one. That's Book of Night. I'd say don't go into this expecting similar vibes to Folk of Air, because that's what I did. At the start, it took me a while to get into it, but by the end, I am now desperate for the sequel to this actually. 3 physical books in a row, let's go. Next it's Electra, and Electra was so annoying throughout this book. I'm team Clytemnestra, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce her name, but yeah, I found her great, but Electra was just so annoying. We are back on the library book streak. The next one is The Comfort Book, and it is exactly what I needed at the time, with heartwarming quotes. Again, another library book, and that is The Colour Purple, and that was actually also for a book club. I found this a very difficult and harrowing read, especially with it being written in the form of letters, which I'm not used to, but it was so worth it. Oh, would you look at that? Another library book. Now we've got Hex, and for me this just screamed female rage. It was an amazing short story about witches, and I would highly recommend. The next book is When I Hit You. This was another really harrowing read, but it had a very important message. The next book is Queen of Nothing. I thought that this was a great ending to the Folk of Air trilogy, and I love Jude so much. The next book is The Lighthouse Witches. It was a super creepy story for me because I'm not really accustomed to reading creepy books, and it had like my toes curling and my teeth clenched, and now I'm so excited to explore creepy books and that genre more. Next up we have The Stolen Heir. It was a great spin-off for the Folk of Air trilogy, and because I love Jude I was kind of worried, but I actually found Ren to be a really good main character. Next up, we've finally got another physical book, and that is The Atlas 6. I found this such an interesting and in-depth portrayal of magic, and my favourite part that stuck out to me was the characters, because I found them very wonderful and interesting. The next one is It Happened One Summer. I actually found this to be a really good romance. I loved the chemistry between the two of them and the character development throughout, not just the development of their relationship, but the development of them as individuals as well was great. Next one is Small Things Like These, and for me this was like a really small book that packed a big punch with a really nice cute message throughout. The next book is actually my new all-time favourite romance book, and that is happy place. It was such a cozy, nice book, and I loved the focus on the friendship throughout, and it also had second chance romance, which is the first time I've ever read that, which was nice. Next, we've got one of the most hyped books of the year, and that is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I loved this. It was a great coming of age story, and I found it really wonderfully immersive. It also combined two of my favourite hobbies. It was a book about games, what's not to love. Next, we have Keeper of Enchanted Rooms. This was a magical book, and it had the cutest little dose of romance in there, which I actually really appreciated. It was very unique, and it was a very interesting concept at the centre of the book as well. Next, we've got On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous. This was a lyrical, poetically written masterpiece. I absolutely adored it, and I'm not sure if you can tell, I tapped it constantly. Next up, we have another physical book, and that is Fahrenheit 451. I found this a really thought-provoking story, and it really made me think about the concept of censorship and also what the future may look like. Next, we have Stone Blind. This is an amazing story surrounding what happened to Medusa, but don't go in expecting the story to be centered on Medusa. It's more centered on the gods who were the culprits for what happened to her. Next up, we have this chunky boy, June. This was incredible, and it had unforgettable world building. I adored it. But for me, the ending was kind of anticlimactic and made it fall short a little bit for me. But overall, still amazing. Next, we have a reread, and that is The Universe in Your Hand. This is my all-time favourite science book, and I read a lot of science books. I think it's really accessible to those who have never read any science books or know much about science, but also still really interesting and engaging for those who know a lot about the subject already. Next up, we have Mad Honey. I was shocked by how much I absolutely adored and devoured this book. Also, bees. Next, we have Lessons in Chemistry. It's about an intelligent woman in STEM who is breaking barriers and crushing the glass ceiling. What is not to love about her and her story? The next book is Mythos. This was my first dive into Greek mythology, and I'm not sure if you've been able to tell, I've read quite a few of them since because I'm in my Greek mythology era. I found this really easily digestible, and it was also really informative. It's like a condensed version of a lot of the events which happened surrounding multiple gods throughout Greek mythology. The next book is The Picture of Dorian Gray. This is my new favourite classic, and it was an incredible depiction of vanity and corruption. So we have second place for my favourite book of the year. These two books, I found it so difficult to choose between for which one was my favourite because they're so very different books. Both of them are vastly different. One is fantasy, one is literary fiction. One of them is thick, one of them is short. I just found them like very different, but they both hit really hard, so it was really difficult for me to pick between the two of these. But in second place, we have Babel. This book and the characters will live in my whole heart forever. It was an incredible story, and I can't even articulate in words how much of a hold this story had on me. And finally, in first place, we have The Bell Jar. My entire being was ripped out by this book while I was reading it. 10 out of 10 would recommend to a friend. Thank you so much for joining in and listening to every book that I have read so far this year. 43 books, absolutely amazing. Let's hope I can read about 37 more and read 80 books this year. That would be crazy for me and a really great goal. And let's aim for more of them to be from my physical TBR and refrain from getting books from the library. I got this. Thank you, bye.